Good afternoon. The hour is 4 p.m. I'm calling the St. Louis County Council Special Committee for Budget Oversight meeting to order, June 2nd, 2021. Again, it is 4 p.m. and clerk, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Days.
Here.
Councilmember Webb.
Present.
Councilmember Fitch.
Here.
Councilmember Harder.
Present.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, and also present will be Councilman Tracus. We make sure we acknowledge that. We are going to be reviewing the municipal court budget. This afternoon, we have decided on a different kind of process where we will come in and get preliminary information on what it is that you're looking at and what we're looking at in terms of the budget. So the committee takes official notice of and admits into evidence all St. Louis County ordinances and resolutions. And that was part of my introduction. So Courtney, I'm going to let Chris come up and give us a brief overview first, and then you will come in and answer some questions or whatever we may have and move forward in that vein. All right, thank you. Thank you, Chris.
It's kind of nice doing this in person instead of on the camera.
I like it.
That's very nice. Okay, so you all received a memo on the 24th on my review with Courtney and the municipal courts. Just to remind you all kind of the process. So I sent an email to the budget unit director in question. We set up a private meeting. Essentially what I do is I go through the year-to-date budget report at the time of that meeting. Obviously, so when we did this, it was middle to end of May. So anything, as I looked at their year-to-date budget report that was 35, 40% over year-to-date spent, that was a question I asked, basically. Then the other piece of it is I take, so for the last several years, of course, I've taken digital and written notes in all of our budget hearings. I take those questions, anything that was a large topic of conversation. In those budget hearings, I just do a follow-up on that. So the memo that you have is based on that. The 2021 budget for the municipal courts is $1,547,231. Other than noted where I noted in the memo to you below, there was nothing outstanding that was jarring or out of order. I did note here, and I know that Courtney will go into detail. I'll just do a high level thing. So particular attention should be made to the transition to Show Me Courts. This is something that's been discussed in budget hearings and to the council for over 3 years. That this has come, this is something we knew was coming and need to be happening. Show Me Courts is implemented. Courtney will talk about that. And but there's quite a bit of backlog, partially due to COVID, partially due to other things. And so the concern there is simply the in-code system, which is managed through Tyler Technologies, which also runs our Munis system, is who that system was. All those previous cases were managed by, and now the Show Me Courts takes that over. So now we have a large number of cases that have to be moved over. That contract was to run out on June 1st. So that major Sorry, I just noticed the feedback. So the major backlog, moving all those cases over to the new system, that Tyler Technologies contract ran out yesterday, technically. And so one of the concerns is either the municipal courts, Courtney will have to rearrange her budget to establish a new contract to continue that forward, or they may, and I don't know what the answer to that is. She was still working on it when we met the first time back in early May. They may have to come to the council for a supplemental appropriation for the purpose of extending that contract. So that's kind of my highlights. If you have any questions of me specifically, happy to answer those. Otherwise, I will turn it over to Courtney.
Any questions of Chris at this time? Any questions? Chris, let me ask you this one on the last page of your memo, because you just talked about the contract. It's with Tyler Technology, I'm assuming. That's who we are with now. And it said that you had made the decision not to include funding in the 2021 budget to renew that contract. So are you going to renew it perhaps with some variables, because down at the last sentence, depending on the court's ability and Tyler's willingness to remove some costs associated with the current e-board, the court may seek an appropriation. So are we going to not renew? Are we going to renew with some caveats?
So I would let Courtney answer that question. So in the memo, that is her response to my question about that.
Okay.
So that's her response. I didn't write that part.
Okay.
I translated put the response in the memo to those specific questions. My questions are in bold in the memo. Everything else after that is her responses. So it'd be more appropriate for her to answer that question.
All right. Thank you. Any questions, Councilman Harder?
Yeah, Chris, was it the understanding that by this time, under normal circumstances, by this time we would have migrated over to the show me courts, and that's why they weren't anticipating renewing the Tyler contract going forward?
My understanding is that had we not had COVID, that they would have probably been able to get everything migrated over by the end of this June 1st deadline, because they didn't renew the contract. They didn't put, the municipal courts didn't ask for that in their budget to renew that or any variation of that. Listen, COVID derailed a lot of plans for a lot of departments. But again, I would let Courtney address the specifics of that.
So that's why it's not in the budget for a renewed contract for Tyler.
Right. In our discussion, Courtney relayed to me that they did not renew the Tyler Technologies because they expected to be able to migrate over the cases that they were going to migrate over.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question.
Councilwoman Webb?
Thank you, Madam Chair, excuse me. Because when I was reading through, so it's not just COVID, wasn't there some technical issues as well?
Right. So the migration, and I'm not the IT guy, but so in a lot of cases, when you switch from one software set to another software set, there's a lot of times a migration program that will just pull the data out and move it over into the new system. That was not possible between the Tyler Technology Encode system and the Show Me Courts system. So the migration then has to be done manually, which is labor intensive, cost intensive, and of course, obviously time intensive.
So even if,
Okay.
so even if there wasn't a COVID issue, if they still had to overcome this technical issue as well for time.
Yeah, the technical issue was there regardless of the pandemic.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilman Fitch, did you have any questions at this time?
Can't hear him.
No, ma'am, not at this time. I'll wait for Courtney.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right. Courtney, you're up.
So I can start, if you guys don't mind, I can start with responding to your guys' questions on the budget issues and the transition, the technical issues. So specifically on Tyler, on the renewal of their contract, they do contracts in 3 years. There's an option to give at least 60 days notice of your intent to vacate that contract. They send out an itemized invoice, which we have not received for this renewal term. And I did not include it in the budget because all of the cases were to be moved and the court was to be up and functioning January 1, 2021 on Show Me Courts. The court has done that. The court has been on Show Me Courts since the first of the year. No new cases have been filed into the previous case management system Encode. They have been filed in Show Me Courts. That being said, that itemization for the interfaces and whatnot that are part of the Encode product, I've taken that and from the previous year and itemized out what we don't need. So what I don't want to do is pay for a bunch of functionality that's not used. So all we use Encode now for is the cases that existed prior to January 1 until working with conjunction with county IT, we can get those cases migrated over into Show Me Courts. So for example, reporting the outcomes of cases to the Department of Revenue or Highway Patrol. Those are two interfaces that exist in Encode that we pay for that we don't need. So I don't want to continue to pay for those. Our contract term with Encode was set to end at the end of May. Like I said, I've not received an invoice from Tyler for the 2021 to 2022 term. And on April 6th, I requested to speak to our account representative at Tyler and have received no response to date. So we're working on that, but I'm stuck at this point. We're not going to pay the full invoice. We don't need all of those services. And notice was given that we needed to talk. So that's where we are specifically regarding that aspect. There are funds remaining in the budget. I budgeted very conservatively in 2020 and for Show Me Courts and coming into the 2021 year because I wasn't sure what all we were going to be able to get accomplished. And I'm glad we made the decision to do that because we do have some funds available. We were able to get more things done in 2020 than what was possibly anticipated, hoped for, but we weren't sure. So I think if we can get, I'm hopeful that if we can get that number down to a manageable number that we can cover in our budget, we will not have to be asking for an appropriation. But I can't say one way or the other without getting the information back from Tyler on the itemization and how that's going to work out. We are working with county IT to create a robot, for a lack of a better word. The acronym is an RPA, and it's going to move the information from Encode into Show Me Courts, and that way we will then cease using Encode altogether. Part of the challenge with doing that is there were about 20 departments within the county and different portions of departments that had access to the court's case management system, which is a problem within itself. So it's certainly taking longer than what we had hoped. COVID 2020 certainly was devastating towards this goal, but not insurmountable. So we're getting there and we're moving forward. The court itself has manually entered over 3,000 cases at this point. My clerks have done wonderful work in making that happen. Unfortunately, the technical issues that were talked about, a few of them are talked about in here. With getting everything moved over, we also, by court rule, have to maintain a case and judgment searchable index, and county IT is going to work on that. So that is one place where if a case was closed in Encode, that will hold all of our old cases. So we're not moving old data into the new case management system. So some of the technical difficulties, one thing Show Me Courts does require is that there's an electronic filing of all new cases with the court. So that forced the county counselor's office to get new software to meet that requirement. And we have run into some technical difficulties on their system getting up and running, which has inhibited the filing of lots of tickets with the court. So those are the main technical difficulties that we're facing currently.
So you're saying that the county counselor's office also has to get new software to interface with Show Me?
And they have.
They already have that.
That's been in the works for over a year at this point. That too was supposed to be in place on January 1 and for numerous reasons was not. Then February and March, and it now is a Regis product, and Regis has not implemented a prosecuting system of this size, so they're being met with some challenges along those lines as well, but it's my understanding that we should be expecting that to come to an end here in the next couple of weeks.
Okay. Did you want to go over any of the other information that was sent to you, i.e., well, you discussed the backlog, but the virtual meetings and things like that. And when are you going to be back up full with having court cases in person?
The Supreme Court issued an order last spring ordering that the presiding judge of each circuit would have to make a determination for his or her circuit as far as what phase they were in. And that phase dictated what you could do in and out of your court. Could you have court? Could you not have court? That all these phases dictated it. And it was dictated for the 21st Judicial Circuit that we could not hold court until the circuit was in phase 3. So to date, we have not been able to hold in person, any in-person court. We have held virtual hearings. The challenges that come with virtual hearings is you can't hold anyone accountable for not appearing at a virtual hearing because we can't force somebody to forego their in-person appearance. So virtual hearings have been optional. Many people they want to come in and get their stuff taken care of and be done with it. Other people are not going to until maybe we have to force them to do so through some mechanism. That being said, the Supreme Court issued another order late last week that as of June 15th, the order to have phases will be lifted. So that will effectively be no more. So we will be able to resume in-court appearances. We are going to continue virtual appearances for the number one purpose of people, if they don't feel safe, they still have that option. We don't want to remove that option from them, but we will have in-person appearances. The main difference will be they're still going to be summoned to come to court. If they want the virtual option, all they have to do is contact the court. We'll schedule them on a virtual option. By doing that, they are foregoing and waiving their right to an in-person appearance. It's kind of in lieu of. So we can then hold them accountable for not appearing for that virtual hearing, which is what we haven't been able to do over the last year. So we are planning to move forward. Probably, I would say mid-July, we want to give people ample notice of their requirement to appear in court.
Any questions for the Councilwoman Harder?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Let's go back to the Tyler contract. If we, looks like we've run out of time in this because it's due. Do they have the power to just turn it off, or is it just, we won't get support for that, or how does that work?
Our county IT has been, because we've been working with them, they are aware of it. They are not going to be turning the system off. We can't pay an invoice that doesn't exist, and I have not seen one. So even if we had renewed and had the full amount in the budget, we wouldn't be able to pay. I don't have an invoice.
So if they did send us an invoice, how much would that be?
I believe that just going off last year, it's about $185,000.
For 1 year?
Correct.
So we would only need 1 year, right?
Correct.
In order to get everything caught up.
Correct.
So-
Again, we just don't need all of the functionality. So I really don't want to pay for each itemization that's on there. We don't need all the functionality that we.
So it may be less.
Yes.
Okay. So if you did have to do a supplemental, it'd be something less than 185.
That's certainly my goal. Yes. That the 185 would be a worst case scenario.
Okay. So the implementation of the show me courts, how many cases are we seeing in a backlog that you have?
If you don't mind, I'd like to speak about specific backlogs. There's about 98,000 cases that are pending in code already, that already exist and that are already there.
Oh, it's stop. What? What?
About 98,000
98,000 cases
that are pending, correct?
in your current system?
Correct.
From how long ago?
Some of them go back to, I've come across some that go back to the early 2000s. There is data in there that goes back to 97, but that was on a previous case management system that was migrated to Tyler. And during that migration process, some of those cases were reopened. So I really don't think that there's much to those cases. I think those are cases that were taken care of in the previous case management system.
Trying to get my head around that number and what that means. So are these cases that have been adjudicated, or are these just pending?
They are pending cases. They have not been adjudicated.
So that person has not appeared in court, not paid a fine?
They may have appeared in court, but they have not been found guilty or assessed any type of fine or any sentence has been rendered, no.
So do they get notices for this whole period of time, or it just disappeared off the radar of any kind of people knowing that they've got a case that's been sitting there since?
Speaking frankly, yes, that's what's happened in the past, yes. Going forward, no, that's not what will happen. But yes, that is what has happened in the past. Those cases have not been touched in some cases 20 years.
20 years.
Yes, sir.
How much of that was COVID related?
Oh, these predate COVID.
So this is not even talking about the COVID backlog
Correct.
in the last year. So
Correct.
and that adds how many more to that number?
Right now, I believe there are over 10,000 cases waiting to be reviewed and filed with the court from the COVID year and including this year, 10 to 15,000.
10 to 15,000?
Yes, sir.
And then these are what? Parking tickets, speeding tickets?
A vast
trash,
range.
Everything?
Yes.
But nothing that would go to the circuit court. These are all misdemeanors or ordinance violations?
It's all in how the police department wrote the ticket and how the county counselor filed. If they thought it was appropriate to go to the state, they would have refused it and sent it elsewhere.
And why weren't these recorded? And why is the backlog again?
Recorded.
I mean, they're in your system, right? They've
Mhm.
just not been adjudicated. Do you know why they've not been adjudicated?
Again, just being very honest and speaking frankly, there's been a lack in just the general court management, I guess, is the best way to put it. There's a certain level of management that's required in your caseload. I mean, you can't, an action has to be taken on every case. When somebody doesn't appear in court or appears in court, what happens next? You have to put something on that case to make it happen next, and that was not happening. When I came on, our judges were closing less than 40% of the cases filed every year. And that's something that we have been working on. And I can say for 2021, it's vastly different. Granted, our caseload for 2021 has not been near what it normally would be. But it is certainly something that we are working on, and it's certainly not anything that's acceptable.
So these 98,000 people, do they have bench warrants for not failure
Some.
to appear or whatever the issue?
Some
may
do,
be?
some don't.
So if they get pulled over today, that may still be on their record?
Absolutely.
Okay. And how much money are we looking at, since we're talking budgets here? How much do you think is still outstanding fines for that 98,000?
Oh, I can't say that because the case hasn't been adjudicated. The judge hasn't entered a judgment or sentence, so I can't answer that question.
You don't have an
No,
dollars an issue, or
no,
you don't know?
no, I can't do that.
Okay. And then the COVID backlog, that part, we know about how much is outstanding, don't we? In fines that.
No, same thing. They have not gone to court. That has not seen a judge. The judge has not entered a fine, so I can't answer that. There's too much of a wide range of possibilities on that. I can't offer an answer on that. I can offer that from 2017 to present, there's about $724,000 outstanding of fines and costs that have been assessed, that have not been collected.
700,000?
About 724,000, yes. It's 723 and change, but rounded up to 724.
So we have not collected, that has not gone into any coffers of St. Louis County?
Correct.
Like it normally would?
Portions of it, yes. That includes fines, court costs, surcharges, and fees as well. So there would be a portion of that that would be allocated to different places statutorily or by ordinance. But yes, that also includes a portion of fines. And I do not have the specific breakdown of what's what, but that is the total amount that's outstanding.
And this is just St. Louis County's portion of the municipal court. This isn't other munis rolled into this. This is just unincorporated St. Louis County, correct?
Are you referring to the 5 municipalities that contract with us for
That
court
makes up this
services?
89,000 cases. Is that just in unincorporated St. Louis County?
No, that would include the 5 municipalities that contract with us as well.
And who are those?
Twin Oaks, Green Park, Village of Marlboro,
Village of what?
Marlboro.
Marlboro?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'm missing a couple, but I can get those for you.
Okay, but they'd be minor compared to what unincorporated.
Oh,
St. Louis
vastly,
County.
yes. And they don't actually get any fines back at this point per the contractual agreement.
Okay, I have some more questions, but I'll do them one time.
Councilwoman Webb.
So I'm just listening and trying to make sure I'm following correctly. So from 2000 until 2021, there are cases that for 20 years that have not been adjudicated. So
Yes,
a
ma'am.
person can have a warrant from 2001 and get pulled over.
Yes, ma'am.
And none of that has been through the court system at all.
Correct.
So I may not be looking directly as a budget issue, but what are we doing to remedy this? Or what is our strategy to address these outstanding court cases that need to come before the?
What's required, one thing that's required because of technical requirements, all warrants that are outstanding are going to be recalled. There was an order signed to do that. My reasoning for that is a couple-fold. Number one, it's a functionality issue. We have to reissue those warrants in the new case management system. Secondly, somewhat of where I think you were kind of going, having a warrant out for 20 years on a potentially minor ordinance violation could be really damaging to someone, and that is not the court's
Trying to get
purpose.
a job or something?
And the fact that there are cases that have been sitting out for this long, the court's culpable for that. And we have to do a better job of administering our people's court, and that's part of doing that. So a lot of decisions that have been made in the last year and that will be made for a while is we need to right our ship, and we need to do things better. And to do things better, sometimes we have to make some difficult decisions and undo some things, and that's our goal at this point.
So I would want to know we're going to do some things better. And I don't know if that's something that we take up in justice, health, and welfare, but we need to make sure we have an understanding of what is that do better.
Yeah.
And to serve our communities better. And so that is something that I think that we need to take out of this committee hearing.
Perfect. I'd be happy for that. That'd be great.
It just astonishes me, but.
Yeah, it astonished me. Me too. It's kind of, again, you have to, look at you have to look at the large picture, and then we just kind of funnel down and fix things as we can. We can't be a wholesale change overnight.
That's true. It's not this massive of a problem, of course.
Correct.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Madam
Thank you.
Chair.
Thank you. Councilman Fitch?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Courtney, can you hear me okay?
I can, thanks.
Okay, I actually have a budget question, but I have to get there first. So if you're
Okay. Go ahead.
So I'm going to drill down to something you said to Councilman Harder about 10 to 15,000 cases since the pandemic waiting to be reviewed. By whom?
The county counselor's office.
So I'm trying to picture this. So a police officer writes a speeding ticket on a county road. They send it to the county counselor's office for review. The county counselor signs the information and they send it over to you to docket it and get it ready for court. Do I have the process right?
Yes.
So the place where the choke point is the county counselor's office. Am I understanding you right?
Yeah, the court cannot docket anything until we receive the information filed.
So do you have any idea, maybe you're the wrong person to ask, why are these cases sitting there and have not been sent to you?
That is because of the case management system technical issues that they're waiting to the attorneys, we meet about this regularly. The attorneys are waiting to hit the send button on thousands of cases, but the case management system is not allowing them to do that right now. So they're working out the technical difficulties. There was a training that was supposed to take place yesterday. I believe it is taking place tomorrow, and that issue is supposed to have been resolved in the very near future. So I look for that to improve quickly.
Let's assume it gets resolved tomorrow.
That would be great.
They hit a button and all 10 to 15,000 cases come over to you then? Is that what happens?
Correct.
So here's where my budget question comes. So how long will it take to get through just those new cases, those 10 to 15,000? 2 months, 6 months? How long, roughly?
Specify getting through them, because there's different portions. As far as us reviewing them, as far as what has been submitted to us, make sure that it's submitted properly. We accept it. We then issue a summons to that individual, because odds are their court date's already passed. That's on their ticket. So we have to issue a summons to them. I prefer not to do a summons any less than 4 weeks out. I want to make sure people have ample notice to make whatever arrangements are needed for them to come to court. Then at that point, you're talking at least a month out for each ticket. So I would probably not see that backlog would really being realistic, probably the end of the year.
So by the end of the year, all 10 to 15,000 new cases should be in the system, court dates assigned, people had an opportunity to appear or not, warrants issued if not, or come in to pay their fine. Is that accurate?
Yes, ideally. Well, the municipal court cases are not under the Court Operating Rule 17 time standards. I do liken them to associate criminal cases where we should not be exceeding more than 3 months on the majority of these cases. So if you figure a person comes in and asks for a continuance on their first appearance, they want to seek the advice of counsel. Okay, so now we continue that out a month. Okay, fine. Counsel comes in that time and they should be able to speak with the prosecutor and handle their business if that's possible. And then they shouldn't be adjudicating cases in 3 months. So it would be my hope that all those cases filed, the majority of them could also be fully adjudicated at that point.
Okay, and here comes my budget question. So once they hit the button, the county counselor's office, they hit that button and here comes 10 to 15,000 new cases on top of the 90 some odd thousand cases you already had. Do you need additional staff to now deal with all of this? Do we need additional judges? What's your thoughts there? Because that's going to be a budget issue for 2022. I
believe that the staff I have right now is amazing. I inherited most of them, and we have worked our way through understanding the difference in expectations and what is acceptable, and they've embraced that change. So to say that I would need additional staff, I would never turn it down. We anticipate growth in this court, and that's what we're working towards. So I would never turn that down, but additional judges, full-time judges, would be wonderful. That would be something that would allow us to offer not just evening court, but also daytime court, and free our judges up for additional programs and whatnot that we could put in the court.
All right, thank you for that. And then you talked earlier about management of the case system or the case load or the entire system, we'll call it that.
Yeah.
So where does that issue lie? Who's, I call it one throat to choke. Where does that problem lie? Is it you?
Yes, sir.
So, and can you tell us why you haven't been able to make sure that the computer system was up and running and ready to accept these cases?
Well, I inherited the 98,000. That had not been since then. I'm sure a number of those are since me coming in. I came in July of 19, and then 2020 has been what 2020 has been. But ideally, the clearance rate of 1 is the goal. We want to dispose of every case that's filed in our court. And what keeps you from doing that are numerous unwarranted continuances are the number one thing. And that's something that we have to address as a court, as a whole court. And as far as the case management system up and running, the courts is up and running and ready. Our clerks have been manually entering cases since January 1. It's the other portion of, and that's not a Regis product. We have a state product that's provided to us by the state, maintained by the state, programmed by the state. The county counselor's office is using a product that is purchased from Regis that just communicates with ours. So, having their case management system up and running is not my responsibility. The courts was ready to go as promised on January 1.
Okay, so I'm still peeling the onion here. So this Regis system that's not working as it should have been, is the holdup of this entire, since the pandemic started, 10 to 15,000 case backlog, is that right?
I would not say the entire time the pandemic, no. I think that there's been 3 different lead prosecutors, if you will, for municipal cases since I've come on. There is a whole new set of attorneys over there now, and it just didn't get done.
So if you had the same attorneys that you had been used to dealing with in the county counselor's office, are you saying that this would have been done?
Nope, not saying that at all.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand where the choke point is here.
The cases have to get filed. That's the bottom line.
So the cases aren't being filed by the county counselor's office is the bottom line. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
We can't work cases we don't have.
And so if we talk to the county counselor, will they tell us this is Regis's fault for not getting the system up and running?
I think that's a fair answer, quite frankly.
Okay, and who in county government's responsible for making sure Regis does what we're paying them to do? Is it the Department of Administration? Is it the courts?
It's not the courts. It's the executive branch that's having difficulty getting the case management system that they need to file their cases.
Have they given you an explanation as to why this holdup has occurred?
The pure size and a number of tickets. They have never implemented a system or implemented a prosecutor's office of this size that handles this level of number of tickets.
What do other courts do? Do they go buy a system? Because everybody's not using Regis, right?
It's a very popular system, yes. The majority of municipalities are using PAMs. They were kind of the only shop in town for a while for this type of case management system.
And what's it called, PAMs?
Correct. Prosecuting Attorney Management System.
Okay. Are we the largest court system, the county municipal court system using that system? Is that what's the problem?
I would say that's accurate at this time, yes.
So if Florison's using it, they're not having any problems with it? It's just us because of the case load?
I'm not aware of what Florissant is using. And I hesitate to speak too far about Regis's business. Okay. But from my understanding, yes, we are the largest that they have implemented to date.
Yeah, and who have you talked to in the county counselor's office to get this moving, to find out what the holdup is and the choke points are?
It's definitely been a team effort. I mean, every person that plays a role in the court has been involved. Steve Capizzi is, again, for lack of a better term, the lead prosecutor right now for municipal cases. And of course, I've worked with Ms. Warwick.
Okay. What do you need from us budget-wise, from your perspective, to fix this problem?
I didn't know I'd get a wish list.
Well, we want to help you get the problem fixed, and if there's something you need from us, we need to know what it is.
I think that the number one thing is, again, understanding that we didn't get to this position overnight, and we did not. It's not going to happen. It's not going to change overnight. But I would ask that you continue to have trust in us, continue to have trust in me, and in what our goals are, and that our best interest is for our communities and the constituents and St. Louis County, that we have to fix some of these things. So I think that the number one thing, and it's not even necessarily a budgetary item, is just to understand that we got work to do, and we're going to do it, and we're going to get there. As far as, budget speaking specifically, I don't know. I mean, we certainly need larger courtrooms. We certainly need full-time judges. A court of this size should have full-time judges, which is going to require a drastic increase in their pay, $39,000 a year for what my expectation of a judge is, and does not meet that. And hopefully we will have a need for a larger staff in the very near future. Again, the goal is to grow the court and provide as many services we can to the community. So in order to do that, we need judges, we need people, but we first have to get our own house in order before we can really start doing a lot of things. But we're going to do it. But I don't, budgetarily for a dollar amount, I don't have that. I couldn't give you a specific need other than those. And that's all going to require legislation, and as you guys are all aware, so.
All right, Madam Chair, I'll let others ask questions. I do have a few more, but I'll let others go through. Thank you. Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Whiteside, so I was just trying to gather, all of these solutions are for the COVID issues, COVID-induced issues, but we have issues that precede COVID. And so I am just as concerned about those issues that preceded COVID and how they're going to be remedied, even if you staff up, even if your staff works overtime, you get your full-time judges, you're going to be able to handle that 10 to 15,000 by close of business this year, end of the year. Not that other 98,000, and that's a bigger concern for me as well.
There are things, orders have not been signed yet, but there are things that I'm working on that are going to help remedy that. And we talk about, pre-COVID and COVID, and when I'm talking about the court's culture change, and I don't differentiate the two, it's a change across the board. I can't focus on just what happened in 2020 because none of this just happened in 2020. So there's things that predate COVID that have to be addressed. So COVID for me, I tend to look at it as more of an opportunity to look at how to provide the administration of justice to more people. We would have never have thought about having virtual hearings in the past. Are they the best things in the world? No. Are they frustrating? They can be. But they're also make court available to some people that maybe wouldn't have been available to them before. And anything we can do to encourage people to just come in and get their stuff taken care of. We're not looking to jam you up. We're not looking to make your life difficult. We are asking you to appear. And if they can appear on a camera and get things taken care of, I am fine with that. And COVID gave us that opportunity. So, I guess silver lining coming into play, but to say that we're only focused on the backlog of COVID is not going to get us where we need to be.
Exactly. Thank you, Mrs. Whiteside, and that's what I wanted to hear you say, and we can learn more about that again in Justice, Health, and Welfare.
Perfect. I look forward to it.
But thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Let's go back to the 98,000 cases of backlog. At your current rate, that's roughly about 9 years worth of backlog, right? If you're doing about 10,000 a year?
Oh, we have the capability to do far more than 10,000 a year.
Okay. So, but under COVID was about 10,000 backlog, correct? You said?
Probably, 10 to 15, I would say, yes.
Okay, so for case of argument, just say we're 8 to 9 years behind. So you said you inherited those numbers, correct?
Yes.
How long you been the administrator of the courts?
19.
Since 19?
July of 19.
Okay, and who was it before you?
What was her last name? She was here for like 20 some odd years.
Okay, so.
She's retired now.
So there was no move afoot to clean those up even prior to you coming on? Getting that number to a manageable number?
In my previous life as the Supreme Court monitor, I had come in and reviewed what was going on in the court, and the court had started to respond to some of my, we'll call them recommendations, and they had started looking at getting rid of some cases and moving some cases. So to say that there was completely not a movement afoot, I think I would be remiss in saying that. And it would be irresponsible of me to say that, but I can speak to what we're doing now, and that is we are moving them.
So with the limited people power that you have in the courts, how do we ever get through 98,000 cases, even if they were just simple parking tickets? I mean, we're going to have to give mass amnesty. What are we going to have to do to get through that to get it to a manageable number?
It's possible. I mean, I think that what we need to look at first are, what are the nature of the violations we're talking about? What are the impacts that it could have on that defendant, on potentially any victims that may be involved? What's in the best interest of the administration of justice and the community? And that's something that I'm currently weighing out. And while I don't have a specific answer on how we're going to do that, we're pretty close to one. So the orders just haven't been signed, so I'm not really willing to, because nothing is completed yet, so.
So under the current system, if somebody gets a speeding ticket and they come before you, before your judges in the virtual sense, correct? And they appear and you have a set time, they come before it, they're in a podium, they plead their case, the judge rules one way or the other.
Correct.
Okay? And they pay their fine or he lets them go, whatever the issue is, correct?
Correct.
And that case is then cleared one way or the other at
Correct.
that point, okay? If that person chose not to show up for that virtual meeting, what happens?
Nothing in the last year, because we cannot force them to forego their in-person appearance. They're constitutionally, they have a right to that. Now that we have the ability to hold in-person court again, we will summon people to court. And then if they choose to do virtual, they are waiving their in-person appearance at that point. There was, since March 13th of 2020, there was no in-person appearance available, so they couldn't waive that. So now that there is, if they call us and request a virtual hearing versus coming in person, then they are choosing to waive their in-person appearance, and we can hold them accountable for not appearing in court at this point. Well, in the near future.
So just say a month ago, if they did not appear, what was consequence?
There was none. So now what'll happen is for all those people that did not appear virtually, they will receive a summons in the mail that actually summons them to appear in court. When they'll also receive a notice that says if you're not comfortable appearing in in-person court, or you are ill, or whatever reason, you may request a virtual hearing, but by doing so, you are waiving your in-person appearance, and failure to appear virtually as requested could result in a warrant being issued for your arrest.
So now warrants are being issued, but they hadn't been a month ago.
They are not yet, because the Supreme Court, Missouri Supreme Court did not lift their order does not become effective till June 15th.
So we can go back and retroactively issue a warrant?
No, we won't retroactively issue a warrant. We will have to resummon them to court. Before, we were just sending out a notice of, hey, we got your ticket and here's your virtual option. Appear at this date and time virtually. Now we're actually sending them a summons and we are ordering them to appear. Those are two very different things.
But I would imagine going back 6 months to a year, trying to find people that maybe move around a lot, or they may even been deceased or moved out of town, whatever. I mean, how are we ever going to track these folks down?
The easy answer would just be to say that there's a Supreme Court rule that requires a defendant to file their change of address with the court when they move. Realistically, that very rarely happens. But if we send a notice out, and that is considered service. So if they don't appear, we have the possibility of issuing a warrant.
So a month ago, you couldn't issue a warrant. So that means they were not in any kind of CAD system. So if they got pulled over during the last month, it didn't show up that
Correct.
they have an outstanding warrant or anything out there.
Correct.
So they basically probably thought they got away with it somehow, one way or the other. But now you're saying going forward, they will appear in the CAD system. So if they are pulled over, it will show a warrant. Is that what you're saying?
If the judge issues a warrant, that's correct. After June 15th.
After June 15th.
Correct.
And that's the phase situation that will open back up?
No, that's the Missouri Supreme Court lifting their order to, that imposed the phases. Phases will no longer be an issue.
Okay, just to catch up with the 10,000 cases from last year. And stuff keeps coming in as we speak. How do you catch up even in this calendar year under your current current manpower, court system, day court, night court? How does that work? What's your plan going?
I think continuing the virtual option will be helpful. We will have in-person court, as we did prior to COVID. I think the larger challenge is we can't go back to having 800 or 1,000 cases on a docket because our court facilities don't hold that. They don't hold it, they did not hold it prior to COVID. But now we still have to respect the social distancing requirements. And while we don't have capacity limits, by doing the social distancing, you're in fact imposing the capacity limits on yourself because you have to have so much space. So we are limited down to about, in our smallest courtroom, there'll be about 150 to 200 people on a docket. And that's substantially lower than what it was before. So right now, the plan is to get back to some sense of normalcy, start conservatively, make sure our house is in order, make sure we are administering justice properly, make sure that we are getting things done correctly, make sure the tickets are coming in, we're getting notice out to people. And as we continue to pull out of this post-COVID, then we can continue and to grow the number of people that we can schedule on our dockets. So we have a plan, but the plan is subject to change, I guess.
So right now, how many court dates do you have in a month that people can actually come in physically or will be able to come in physically and have a court?
Every Tuesday and Wednesday at North and South.
What about West?
West, we have not put anything at West since 19. Most of the cases that go to West are the airport tickets, and we have not had court there, and we're planning on going back to in-person court at West.
Not planning?
Nope,
So
not at
just
this
be
time.
North and South?
Correct.
for 2 nights a week?
At this time, yes.
Okay. Do you anticipate more nights or a Saturday or daytime?
We had not anticipated a Saturday. Statutorily speaking, Chapter 66 requires that our regular dockets do not start until 6 p.m. I do not believe that inhibits us from having other dockets at other times. Part of that is our judge availability, going back to the full-time judges. Our other judges currently have other jobs and practices of their own, so it's very difficult for us to add a bunch of other dockets. But that being said, I would not be opposed to adding more dockets. And it may just become necessary, but we have to have the judges and personnel to do it.
So the judges are based on a 2-day docket per week, right? Their pay is based on a 2-day-a-week docket. It doesn't matter what time.
It's not specified in the ordinance as far as, how many dockets that they're supposed to have. So I can't say that their pay is based specifically off of that, but that is where they're at right now. Plus they rotate duty judge schedules. We have a confined docket every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, a payment docket on Friday. And we still continue those things.
Okay, this is where my budget question comes in. So with that understanding, if we need to up their pay and to create more dockets, maybe 4 dockets instead of 2 a week per judge, and we need more facilities or better facilities to spread that out or more staff, is this something that maybe with the ARP funds that we could use to get us through at least the COVID backlog, because COVID caused this backlog, that we could use those funds maybe?
I think that would be outstanding.
To get through that
Absolutely.
and then go back to normal,
Absolutely.
normal
I don't think
time?
there's anything that would inhibit anybody from appointing provisional judges during this time.
And we could get provisional judges somewhere? Or we have some that we could use that would help with the workload?
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you. Councilman Tracus, I believe you had your hand up.
I do. Any questions? Ms. Whitehead, good to see you.
Good to
Thank
see
you for
you.
coming. appreciate your candor. Also appreciate your falling on a sword that doesn't belong to you. I'm going to ask you some straight questions, and I'd like some straight answers.
You got it.
Okay. Your virtual dockets, it's your intent to continue them, is that right?
Yes, sir.
My understanding of your responses is that it is your belief or you've been advised that because you have a live docket now, that someone who selects to participate or appear by virtual means waives their right to a in-person hearing. How are you going to perfect that waiver? What's your understanding of that?
How are we going to perfect it?
Right.
They'll be provided notice of that, so upfront, that, hey, this is your option, but by doing this, this will happen. Should they appear at the virtual docket, that should be covered again by the judge. Reiterated that they are doing this. I think anytime that anyone is looking at waiving any right that they have, we need to make sure that that is
No question about it.
understood very clearly. So it would be my expectation that any judge that they're going to go in front of, make sure that they understand that, just as they would make sure that they understand what they would be pleading guilty to. If it's virtual, that needs to be docketed on the court's record, that person understood what they were doing, that they understood that they were waiving their in-person appearance. If they don't appear, then it's really hard to have that conversation with them. So what we would have is the document that we sent out to them saying, you have this option. When they call or send smoke signals or whatever they do to let us know that they want a virtual appearance versus an in-person appearance, that has to be put on the court record that the defendant has requested an in-person appearance via phone, via fax, via email. If it's an email, that should be printed out. It's very similar to any type of oral motion that could potentially be made in court. This person is requesting this, the court's granting it. So that would be how we would go about
The
that.
problem I have with that is all of that you just spoke about is generated by either your staff or court personnel, right?
Yes,
So if I'm a defendant and I've chosen a virtual option and I don't appear, did you have me sign anything claiming that I waived my right to in-person hearing?
nope,
And there's absolutely no record whatsoever that confirms my option to select the virtual hearing, right?
not unless it's submitted by email. The email will be printed out
So
or faxed.
where I'm going with this is the problem is now, how are you going to impose any penalty on that person for not appearing? Because you don't have any proof that they waived their right to an in-person hearing.
That would be completely up to the discretion of the judge. However they feel it would be appropriate.
We're going to get to them in a minute.
Okay,
But you understand what I'm saying?
absolutely, 100%.
So there's a problem there, and I think one way to probably solve that, and I would encourage you to consider it, is some sort of electronic signature on a form, so that you at least have the argument that they've gone through and completed a form and signed it electronically. So at least there's that. Now, with respect to, because I think it's really important that you be able, or your judges, such as they are, excuse me, are able to impose some sort of penalty for their failure to appear, or as a consequence for appearing, meaning that they were found guilty, whatever the case may be. Have you obtained any legal opinion with respect to what we've just talked about? Meaning the effect of a waiver, basically, by the selection of the virtual option. Anybody, any attorney, any higher official opine to you that, yes, that's right, they waived their right?
Our judges, yes, and judges that I work in conjunction with in the 21st Circuit.
Okay. Anything in writing?
No, I mean, at this point, they're comfortable with the docketing it on the court record.
So this amounts to basically a informal opinion by some municipal judges.
Municipal judges and circuit judges, yes.
Give me a minute. You mentioned that part of the problem that you've talked about is a lack of court management, I think is what you said. And you very graciously put that on yourself. And I think, as I said, that's very gracious. I don't know that it's accurate. But I want to talk about this concept of court management. And are there components to that?
Yeah, I mean, I do some educating on a national level, and what we want to get to is what is referred to as a high functioning court. That means you're disposing of, for every case that comes in, you're disposing of that case. You can create a number of cost per case. How many cases, what is the percentage of cases that you are closing? How many continuances are you doing per case? And while the court's purpose and focus and priority is not the generation of revenues, the court still has a business portion to it. And you have to be able to speak intelligently to that to be able to function highly in your court. And that's just the business aspect of it. But those are three things that are very important. We need to know what kinds of cases are being filed in our court and be able to quantify that so we can then analyze that data and see what the community need potentially is. Is there a need for a different type of program, or do we need to adjust programs that we provide? So yeah, there are certainly characteristics that are indicative of a higher functioning court.
Okay. Maybe I didn't ask my question as clearly as I would have liked, but so I'll ask it in bites. As I see the components of a municipal court, it'd be fair to say that one component would be your office and your staff.
Yes, we're a cog in the wheel, yes.
And would another component be the prosecutors?
In the court's process, yes.
And would another component be the judges?
Yes.
Okay. So let's just take those three components, right? And would it be fair to say, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so you tell me if I'm wrong, would it be fair to say that those components essentially operate to create or function as court management, as you termed it?
Yes and no.
Okay, give me the no. Why do those three components not constitute court management?
Because the prosecutor's office, they have their own portion to manage. I don't manage them. I don't manage what comes through the court, or what they send to the court. I manage what happens inside of the court. And that's where those numbers come in. So while they are a cog in the wheel of this justice wheel, if you will, I don't have control of that, and I can still be a higher functioning court as long as they are taking care of their aspect. But I don't manage that, but I can't do it without them either.
And I'm not suggesting that you manage it. My only point was, in order for you to manage, you have to have prosecutors that prosecute cases, right?
Yes.
You have to have prosecutors that are familiar with the municipal court system.
Absolutely.
Right? You have to have prosecutors who are experienced and understand the different types of prosecutions that they're handling, whether that's speeding, whether that's something more serious, whether it's problem properties, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, the other component is the judges. If I understand what you said earlier, based on your experience with the municipal court, our judges fail to close 40% of their cases. Is that right?
No.
That's what I wrote down.
They historically have closed about 40%
Okay,
of their
that's right.
cases.
So they failed to close 60% of their cases.
That's probably closer to accurate, yes, sir.
Okay, so my bad on that. Now, you have any experience in circuit courts?
I do.
Okay. Would it be, in your experience, the case in circuit courts that judges fail to close 60% of their cases?
In some instances, yes. To expand on that answer specifically, I think you'll find more of that in most any traffic division, if you will. I think you're far more likely to see that than you are in some other divisions.
Okay. And what's the reason that they fail to close these cases?
Oh, that's going to be a long-winded answer. I think there's a lot of reasons. I think there is not enough respect given to the municipal court as an institution. I think
By the
that
judges?
by everyone.
What does that mean, everyone? Does that mean prosecutors, judges?
Prosecutors,
your office,
practicing attorneys, judges.
defense counsel?
Yeah, very often you hear, oh, it's just municipal court.
Mhm.
Well, municipal court in the state of Missouri accounts for almost 60% of all of the cases filed in the judiciary. And for many people, this is a municipal court may be the only interaction they have with any branch of government. So if we're setting the tone for their opinion of government as a whole, we should probably have our house in order and get it right. So that being said, I think there's been provided a gross informality in municipal court. And that's part of what we need to fix. So when you start thinking about, oh, you have a case in front of us, it's very easy to say that, oh, I don't need to give this speeding ticket as much time and credit as I would say an assault case that you would hear at the criminal level. But that's historically been the problem.
So where I'm
Since
going with this, just so
1976.
we can cut to the chase.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Based on my observation and my limited study of the problem, and I use that term figuratively, because I'm not so sure it's so limited, but be that as it may, is it pretty easy to get a continuance in our muni courts?
Yes.
And so would the idea that and the ease of getting a continuance have anything to do with 100,000 case backlog?
Oh, absolutely.
Now, who grants continuances?
The judges.
Right. And who has to agree with the continuances?
Nobody has to agree to if the judge has ordered it, but if the request is made by one of the two parties, typically if the prosecutor agrees, the judge doesn't balk at that.
Exactly. So if a prosecutor disagrees or objects to the continuance, it's harder to obtain it.
Yeah,
Not impossible, but harder, right?
in theory, yeah.
And a prosecutor who's more familiar with a given case and the length it's gone on may be more inclined to object to a continuance, right?
I can't answer that. That's their prerogative.
Does that sound reasonable to you?
Sounds reasonable.
Yeah. And so would it not benefit our system if we had prosecutors who were dedicated to the muni court instead of rotating in and out of it?
Oh, I think that would be, anybody, whether it's consistency is key. I mean, to long-term success, absolutely.
Right. So let's just take one of my favorite areas, problem properties. I know Councilwoman Webb's concerned about that as well.
Yes.
Right? So if we had a problem property unit inside the county counselor's office, and I'm talking about, in this particular example, 2 dedicated attorneys. They don't get rotated out every 6 months or 3 months. That's all they do, right? They would then necessarily, in your experience, know cases that have gone on for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, right?
Yeah, that would only make sense.
And
Yes.
so the inclination on their part to be cooperative or agree to a continuance may not be there.
I can't answer that.
You can't answer that, okay. Now, well, I'm going to finish up with the judges.
Okay.
Um,
Can I, on one thing on the problem properties and I think, number one, I think that I know there's been discussions to create that. And I do believe that I just actually requested today to be involved in those.
I'm glad to
So
hear that.
I do think that is being looked at. I think the biggest positive to having that type of unit would be not only are they familiar with the properties themselves, they're going to be familiar with the property owners or the residents
Exactly.
of that property. And hopefully they can get more favorable outcomes in the ways of compliance. And so that's, the court is in favor of doing that, definitely. But yes, so
I'm glad
to the
hear that.
judges.
Glad to hear that. Now, these judges, they all have full-time law practices, right?
Yes,
And so this is essentially a second job for them.
correct.
Now,
They would argue it's more than a second job since I've come
I'm
on
sure
board,
they
but
would. I'm sure they would. But the bottom line is they maintain separate and complete and full law practices, right?
correct, yes.
Okay. And so certainly their time and attention is directed at their law practice as much or more than they spend in muni court.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, that would serve to make sense.
Right. How many judges do you have in your court right now?
3 currently allowed for.
3 judges to handle all of these cases we've talked about.
Correct.
So fair to say you could probably use twice that number?
That would be outstanding.
Yeah.
Or 4 full-time.
Right. That might be a harder sell.
I'm willing
but-
to meet in the middle.
Mhm. No, I understand that. How much training do the municipal judges get before they actually sit on the bench and make decisions with respect to continuances or what have you?
They do have to attend a new municipal judge clerk or new municipal judge orientation that's provided by the Office of State Courts Administrator in Jefferson City. I believe by rule, they have up to 12 months to attend that. If they're a practicing attorney, we would not apply for the non-lawyer attorneys, so that's irrelevant, or non-lawyer judges. But so within 12 months, they have to attend that course. And then they go to an annual training every year for their continuing legal education credits. And recently, I have been immersing them in some problem-solving court models and treatment court models that I've been asking them to get educated on. So
You had used the term unwarranted continuances. What is an unwarranted continuance?
just more, in the past, for example, a defendant could call and request a continuance from a clerk. That is no longer an option. That's been taken away for probably since my second week here. So that would be a part of it. Or a person has come in and they've asked for continuance after continuance after continuance. Coming in on your initial appearance and asking for continuance to say, I want to seek the advice of counsel. Great, that's fine. We'll continue out for 1 month. That person comes back and they have not sought that. Then now we're starting to get into that repetitive behavior.
Right.
And that's what I would refer to as an unwarranted. There's no good cause shown to continue that case.
And that's the culture you inherited with municipal courts, fair to say?
Everywhere, yes, absolutely.
Okay. And that's the culture you're trying to change?
Absolutely. A facet of it, yes.
Okay. And then, are you familiar with other municipalities with respect to how they deal with problem properties?
To a degree. We've had some conversations. I think they vary widely. Some handle it as administrative functions, so like we do some of the health department stuff, and some do it just run it through the court like we do.
Mm-hmm.
Those are really the majority of them, but so vaguely familiar, yes.
Are you aware of any municipalities that have dedicated dockets for problem properties?
It really depends on the size of the municipality. Some do, some don't. We do, but we're large enough to substantiate having, those specialized dockets.
And are you aware of any municipalities that have dedicated personnel in their prosecutor's office that do nothing but problem properties?
The city, St. Louis City does.
And they manage their problem properties pretty effectively?
I honestly, I don't know what their numbers are, so I can't speak to that.
Well, you've been very patient, as you have, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. This is a very important issue, and I'm glad to see the attention to this need to change the culture in municipal court, because it does need to be changed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Fitch?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I'll say that I'm around long enough and old enough to remember before we had municipal courts. Every county ticket that was written went to the associate circuit courts. And I will tell you that probably long ago, there were many more cases that went in before we had the municipal courts, because we have a lot smaller unincorporated area today than we did back then. So Courtney, my question for you is there any reason why, since you said we're out of space, we need bigger courtrooms, why couldn't we use those Clayton courts at night when they're unoccupied? There's plenty of parking in Clayton. If people need public transportation, it's available either by bus or by light rail. We have all that here in Clayton. Why have we not done something like that, or have we talked about it behind the scenes and we don't know about it?
Under Chapter 66, we're required to have court locations outside of the county seat. So it's not to say that we cannot or could not use the Clayton facility. We do have a dedicated courtroom in the court's building. I think that would be a security issue. That was talked about briefly when I first came on as a potential idea, but it was a lack of availability of security. That was the biggest issue at that point. And other than that, we just have to meet the requirements, the statutory requirements of being located outside of the county seat as well as of inside.
And that's a state statute, or are you talking about an ordinance?
Chapter 66 of state statute.
And it says if you have a municipal court in St. Louis County, it cannot be held in Clayton?
It says that it can't, not that it can't be held, but it also has to be held outside of the county seat.
Okay, that's different. So you can have a court location, multiple court locations in Clayton, as long as you have one in South County or West County or North County, you're fine. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, that's okay. I understand. So going back to the talk of one of the most serious offenses we hear in the municipal court, or you hear in the municipal court, are DWIs. Is that right?
Yes.
So is it possible that someone got a DWI last March? They haven't been held accountable for that DWI since, and may have actually received additional DWIs?
That is correct.
Do you know of any cases like that?
No, because they haven't been filed with the court.
So there could be sitting in the county counselor's office and you wouldn't know it.
Yes, they could be.
Okay, and same goes for driving while revoked, driving while suspended. We're talking about some very serious driving, careless and imprudent driving type of offenses that maybe have been sitting there for at least a year. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Could you tell the council what Senate Bill 5 did to your municipal court operation? Because this is directly related to the budget.
Well, Senate Bill 5 and subsequently Senate Bill 572 created the terms minor traffic violation and municipal ordinance violation. And I'll qualify municipal ordinance violation as both all-encompassing of all violations of local ordinance and also referring to specifically housing, zoning, and nuisance. So when we're talking about minor traffic and ordinance violations, housing, zoning, nuisance, there are fine caps that were placed on them. Minor traffic is $225, including fines and costs collectively. You cannot exceed that dollar amount, that anything in that minor traffic. Anything ordinance violation, housing, zoning, nuisance, there is a tiered fine schedule. Fourth and subsequent, the highest amount is $450 within a 12-month period, which in my opinion is not practicable. But nevertheless, that's the basis of Senate Bill 5 and 572 regarding the assessment of fines, costs, and things of that nature. That would be the biggest budget impact, I would say. It's actually, the case is actually up for appeal right now, where the excess revenue, we can only collect off minor traffic and housing zoning nuisance. No more than 20% of the general fund can be made up of fines, court costs, and bond forfeitures. We're not even close to that, so.
Okay. Going back to Councilman Tracus's question about problem properties. I have a problem property on Hannah Road that we inherited when I got elected. It still hasn't been remediated, and that's been over 2 years and was in progress for at least 3 to 4 years before that. So this homeowner who still owns it hasn't fixed any of the issues. He gets fined over and over and over again. Will he ever see a jail cell because of the way the Senate bill is written? Can he just continue to ignore those property maintenance violations?
Yes. I mean, speaking specifically about that, yes, you cannot be jailed for minor traffic violations or housing zoning and nuisance. There's some debate over housing zoning and nuisance, but.
So he's able to pay his house note, he's able to pay his taxes, but he refuses to pay fines. So what happens to him in the municipal court then?
Well, the policy in the municipal court has changed on that. Previously, a fine was assessed. You were given a payment plan to pay however much a month, and then you had to appear in court. If you couldn't make that and have your payment plan extended, and then if you didn't pay timely or appear in court, a show cause order or a show cause summons was issued for you to appear in court and show cause why you have not met that agreement. If you fail to appear for that, a warrant could be issued for your arrest. That is no longer the policy of the court. Now fines and costs are assessed. The judge takes in one's ability to pay, and they come to an agreement if a payment plan is needed. They'll say, if it's 6 months, this is due in 6 months. If you need more time, come see us on such and such Friday at 2 o'clock. And if you do not meet that point at that time, 60 days after that due date, you go to collections.
And so that person will never see the inside of a jail cell. They can continue to ignore the ordinances of St. Louis County and never face any consequences other than private collections. Is that what I heard you say?
Potentially, yes.
Okay.
I mean, there's judicial discretion included in there as well. So to say never, I can't sign on to that, but.
So I think we see
possible.
where the problem is with getting anything done with these problem properties. At least
Is it that, or do we need to look at a little bit more of a creative approach? I think we can do things a little bit different in our courtrooms that could also bolster to encourage compliance. For example, person comes in and they have siding and grass issues or this, that, the other thing. There are some things that are much easier to take care of than others. If it's a matter of cutting your grass, okay, fine, you come in and you need a continuance, okay, fine, by this time, you come back to the next court session, you need to have these things done. And I think that we can, instead of focusing so much on the punishment for non-compliance, if we could find a way to not reward compliance necessarily, but to encourage compliance, then and get people to where they are less afraid to walk into our courtrooms, I think that will go to serve a purpose for us. Also, I think there are community service options we can look at. So I think there are ways of looking at things that I'm hoping are going to help address some of our problem property issues and other non-compliance issues in the court as well. But I think that we have to try some other ways of doing things in the court and see what happens. I mean, ultimately, if we're restricted by our range of punishments and different sentences that we can impose, then I think we have a responsibility to do things differently and see if something comes out better.
Okay, and one last question to circle back to my first one on the county courts in Clayton. What would it take to allow you or your court to use that space? Is it just a request to Judge Burton, the presiding judge? What would it take to do that? And would there be any financial budget impact when we have to pay for that?
No, I don't think there'd be any additional cost to do that. Again, we have our own assigned courtroom on the second floor. I think it would be a security issue of how do we, the building is empty, essentially empty at that point in time. How do we keep people from running all over the courthouse, getting to our courtroom? There's some things that have been discussed, again, very early on to me coming to the county, that there's also a courtroom on the first floor. So maybe we could hold night court in there in the courtroom that they have on street level versus going up to the second floor. So I think and not necessarily so much of a permission, but I think just having those conversations and, deciding what we would have there, making sure we have judge and staff available to cover all of that. But I don't think it's insurmountable.
Okay, I hope that's something that we look into to get past this bubble that we're sitting in right now. So thank you, Madam Chair. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councilman Harder.
Yeah, let me go back to the judges. You said you have 3 part-time judges,
Correct.
and that covers how many dockets?
2 a week, one at north, one at south. The duty judge covers Monday, Wednesday, Friday confined and the payment docket, as well as the co-occurring mental health docket on Wednesdays. I believe it's in the ballpark of 20 dockets.
20 dockets divided between 3 judges
Correct.
evenly?
No. Judge Endicott takes care of south, and Judge Brown and Judge Kincannon split north.
Okay, and how many, you call them like auxiliary judges or
Provisional judges?
provisional judges? How many of those do you have?
None. There's just the possibility to bring them on. They could be, provisional judges could be appointed.
Okay, so what's holding up provisional judges and getting those in the system?
I don't appoint them.
Who does?
That would be Dr. Page, is my understanding.
Okay, so he could appoint some provisional judges to get us through this bubble.
Yes, I believe that to be accurate, yes.
And is there a limit on how many dockets those provisional judges could take?
No, none that I'm aware of.
Okay, and the purpose of a provisional judge is to be an extra case of vacation, sickness?
Correct. And we have
Conflicts.
an open spot for a 4th judge now. Judge Eldada resigned last May. So we've just, but why Judge Endicott is handling South by herself.
Okay. So you had in your budget for 4 judges,
Correct.
okay? And you still have it in your budget for 4 judges,
Correct.
okay? And how many of the provisional judges did you have in your budget?
None.
So you didn't put anything in for 2021?
No, we haven't historically used them. And they would be, I believe there is something in Chapter 105 of the ordinance that refers to how they would be paid if they were used. But no, there isn't anything that I specifically laid out for provisional judges.
But even if you got a couple of provisional judges and they took each a docket, or maybe 2 dockets, would that help out?
Wouldn't hurt.
Okay. But that would be up to the county executive to find those people and appoint them in that position.
Correct.
And they would get paid accordingly, same as a regular judge?
I'm not sure if the amount is the same as a judge. I believe that there is something in Chapter 105 of ordinances that specifies how they're to be paid as a provisional judge.
How many prosecutors do you have?
I don't have any prosecutors. The county counselor's office, I believe they have 4 prosecutors that work municipal cases.
So 4 prosecutors assigned full-time or just?
I believe they have other duties that are assigned to them as well, but I can't speak fully to that.
Okay, so they only show up when there's a docket. They're there just to administer the docket?
No, they work other than just appearing at dockets. Absolutely, yes.
Okay, but 4 prosecutors to handle 3 courts and multiple dockets, correct?
Yes.
Okay. What other staff do you have that handles these courts? Numbers of people
And within the court?
that you need, yes.
Oh, we could certainly, more clerks would be great.
How many do you have now?
12.
12 clerks. Okay, to cover those dockets.
Mm-hmm.
And is that sufficient to cover those dockets?
Sufficient? Yes. Optimal? No.
Okay, so if we were to bring on more judges, you'd need more clerks to help them, correct?
Yeah, if we were to add a number of dockets and judges, yes, we would have to increase the staff to be able to do that. I mean,
Okay, you said you were 10,000 behind, say COVID behind, we'll call that COVID behind cases. How many were actually adjudicated in that same period of time? If 10 is sitting not adjudicated, were there others that actually were adjudicated during that period of time?
there were some, yes.
But how many?
I wouldn't be able to quantify
1,000?
that.
5,000?
I would say more than 1,000.
So the
For sure.
1,000 are the people that showed
comfortable
up
with
for virtual court,
Correct.
felt they compelled to show up and settle their issues.
Yes.
And those that didn't, they're free, and we really don't know who they are, really, or do we have a record of those folks in some form or another?
Oh, they still have open cases. Yes, and we'll be sending them a summons to appear in court.
Okay, so all the people from last year that did not appear will get a summons here after July
June
or
15th.
June 15th?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, so, and that's just for St. Louis County unincorporated municipal court, correct?
Yes, as for all of the cases we would handle, yes.
Okay, so if you got a ticket in Baldwin and Chesterfield during the same time, and they're having the same problem you're having.
Absolutely.
What I've told them or talked to them about. So if they could they could have a whole bunch of summons hit them here after June 15th from all these municipalities. And how are those ever going to get adjudicated with all these different, all in the same boat, not just you?
There's different ideas that have been talked about and thrown around if we could collectively do something. Some of the things that we've looked at doing, we have public defenders within the court system right now. And, is it a possibility that if we would appoint somebody to a case, it's a very small number of people that really would be eligible for a public defender, but strictly because they wouldn't be looking at jail time, could that public defender potentially look to see what else was in these other municipalities? Maybe, maybe not. But it's going to be difficult. I mean, it is very common that if a person has a case in one municipal division, they're going to have, most likely they're going to have cases in others as well. So it's just going to have to be a lot of figuring it out.
So after June 15th, conceivably say July 15th, they could get pulled over and you could have a whole bunch of warrants out there for someone getting pulled over for a taillight.
Yep.
And suddenly they got 5 warrants because they're in 5 different jurisdictions.
You're exactly correct.
Okay. And they don't know why they got 5 warrants at that point, do they?
They have a pretty good idea, I would venture to say.
But if it goes back to 2019 or
They're still aware they got a ticket.
Yeah, but I mean, if they're part
And
of
they
that 98,000 that are still sitting.
That's a different ballgame.
And those could come current, couldn't they?
They could. I think we have to look at realistically. My focus, to be quite frank, on the 98,000, my focus is on 2018 and forward, because I believe that people move frequently, and as you alluded to earlier, I mean, trying to locate these people, to get them served, to get them to come to court is a challenge. So if we're going to, why would we send out a summons for a case that was sent to us in 2000 that hasn't been touched in 21 years. Over a case that exists from 2018. Now, things have to be taken into account, such as the nature of the violation and whatnot. But to be quite honest, I'm certainly more concerned about the more current cases than cases from 20 years ago.
So if it was your decision, would you then just wipe away everything from 2018 back and let's call it even and
Yeah, for the most part. Truthfully, yes.
And what is the most egregious type of violation in your court? What do you see?
Domestic. I would not want to get rid of any domestic cases. Anything that what is referred to as an enhanceable charge, like DWIs, anything that would be a violent crime, or there may be property damage where money is owed to a victim. Those types of cases, I would not be willing to do a wholesale dismissal on. I think those would need to be looked at further. When you start talking about parking tickets, thousands of parking tickets from decades ago, no, I don't think it's necessary that we spend the court's time or continue to spend the people's money to go after something for that. So minor traffic, yeah, I would just prefer to get rid of them.
Okay. So, but that wouldn't be your decision, would it?
No, that would be a judge decision.
So you'd have to present the stack to a judge and say, go through these and dismiss these or set them aside or do whatever, right?
There's an order to do that sitting on a judge's desk now.
Right now.
Mhm.
And would they start today and go backwards, or would they start in 2018, come forward?
In 2018 and coming forward.
They would be looking at those to clean that up, okay?
No, the judge is going to look at 2017 and back. 2018 and forward, or would be cases that we would continue to focus on.
Okay, so he would have to decide that old stuff, whether there's something there.
Part of the order that, of the package that I'm providing to them will have it itemized out that these are the cases by violation. So it's organized so they can see this is what we're doing. So they can wholesale say, let's get rid of this, let's get rid of this. But I think it's important that we do take note of what we are dismissing.
How long have you known we've had this 98,000 backlog of cases?
I would say since before I came to St. Louis County.
And would you say that your predecessor knew about those too?
Yes, we report it to the state every month.
Okay, and who's your direct supervisor?
Mike Chapman.
Mike Chapman. Does Mike Chapman know of all these?
Yes, I've been made sure he's been abreast of every wide sweeping decision that I've made. We've already dismissed over 30,000 old cases.
Prior to the 98?
Yes, sir.
So we've had 120,000 cases?
Probably closer to 200,000.
200,000 over that same period of time? Or how far back?
Stretching it that far back. We went to this system in 2008. The court has been in operation since 92.
Okay, it's hard to understand the impact of this and trying to get our hands around this whole thing. So
I agree.
So Mike Chapman knew about this since years, since he came on? Is that what you're saying? Every year knew the...
I can't say what he knew prior to me coming on, but he was certainly briefed when I came on, so we could have put together a plan on how to fix it.
Did we ever talk about this when we had our budget meetings every year in October?
We've discussed it.
The backlog, or that you just needed more money to...
No, that there was a backlog that needed to be addressed.
Okay.
No, we never went this far into detail, no, but we've certainly discussed it.
Okay. I'll yield right now.
Thank you. Anyone else with Councilman Tracus?
Thank you. Just a couple questions. This unwarranted continuances we talked about earlier, and I think you acknowledged that was part of the culture that needed to change.
Yes.
Okay. in your experience, be fair to say that there are defense attorneys that perceive that culture and game the system,
Oh, yes,
right? Get continuance after continuance,
sure.
right? And I'm talking specifically about cases like Councilman Fitch mentioned, and I have some in my district that are older than that. So pointing to your creative solutions, and one of the things you said, if I understood you correctly, was that instead of fining, perhaps we could just identify and triage, if you will, things at a problem property that could be done between that court date and say 60 days. And that defendant would report back, right? And the idea would be that those itemized components would have been completed, right?
That'd be the general idea, yes.
Now, based on what you understand and what the court or the judge is able to do, what happens if it's not done? What leverage does the judge have?
Again, we're talking about a punishment if somebody doesn't do something, when the goal is to get them to have enough trust in the system to say, just let me get this done. I think a lot of times you're talking about, it's one thing to get your grass cut. It's a whole nother thing and takes dollars to get a new retaining wall put up, or your house resided, or a new roof put on. So I think those things have to be taken into account. So I think your use of the word triage was probably pretty fair. I mean, we can triage certain things a lot faster than we can deal with some of the larger things. As far as an accountability standpoint, they probably wouldn't have any unless the person wanted to plead guilty and we put them on probation. And then they had to complete these things. And then if they don't complete it, we can revoke probation and,
And do what with them?
potentially remedy at that point.
What are
But
you gonna
we're
do with them?
stuck.
What are you going to do with them if you revoke probation?
We're stuck. You should talk to one of the legislators in Jefferson
That's
City
my-
about
In other
that.
words, you really, your system has no leverage, right? There's no end game. There's no ultimate punishment that can be imposed, to Councilman Fitch's point.
Sure.
So the idea that it's easy to game the system is just going to continue.
I think, yeah. I mean, I think, again, I think it's totally a viable argument that could continue.
And with respect to problem properties, that is the problem.
Absolutely, absolutely it is. But we are we're confined to what we can do.
I'm not blaming you. I'm just
But-
wanting to make it clear for the record.
Yeah.
And my last question is, how many of these cases that you're recommending be dismissed are problem properties? Do you know?
Not
Okay.
yet. No, I have not gotten that. It's quite the spreadsheet to organize. I haven't gotten to that part yet. But problem properties was not included in that wholesale dismissal either.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Councilman Fitch.
just a follow-up on Councilman Tracus's line. So if we added prosecutors, county counselors are really not prosecutors, county counselors that prosecute these cases in the municipal court system, if there's no stick, what good is it to add additional county counselor's office? Can you answer that for us?
No. I don't know. No, I don't know. Again, at Jefferson City. I think that we're stuck. But I do think that this unit in this backlog of cases, if this unit comes to fruition, I think that does lend to a greater possibility of us looking at this old backlog of cases and addressing some of these cases that are a decade old, and what to do with them. And then we can, first we have to be able to wrap our brain around what we're even dealing with and what we're looking at before we can come up with a multitude of viable solutions. But at the end of the day, the enforcement issue is very difficult. So there is no stick.
Yeah, that's my fear, is we throw a bunch of money to the county counselor's office and we still have the same problem, that we haven't resolved the problem. Yes, we've got more cases into the system now, but we haven't adjudicated them. They haven't gone anywhere favorable for the people that have to live around these messes.
Sure.
This document that's in front of the judges right now, What exactly does it say? What is it suggesting that the judges do as far as dismissal of cases? And couldn't the county counselor's office just nolly-pross those cases?
Yes, they could.
So it doesn't have to be the judges making this decision.
No, it does not. We're working together to address the backlog. It's not something that we're going at alone. Again, yes, the court is culpable for allowing our caseload to go unmanaged for so long, but to get it cleaned up is not something we can do alone. So we have partnered while respecting the individuality of the branches that we represent, but we are working together to do what's in the best interest of everybody. So yes, they could nolly, but I'm sure they will be nollying some cases.
Right. And so if they do that or the judges drop them, so what does the memo say? Does it say specific kinds of cases or a year? What is it asking the judges to do?
It would be prior to 2018.
So dismiss which kind of cases prior to 2018?
It's going to be your majority of minor traffic cases.
So
Minor
just
traffic cases where no accident appeared, there's minor traffic in it. Minor traffic violation, it by definition is nothing that took place in a construction zone, school zone, no speeding over 19 miles per hour. So it's all quantified and qualified by those.
safe to say all non-moving violations, those that do not generate points on your driver's license?
Those are included in minor traffic as well.
And then how about drug violations that are ordinance violations?
Drug violations, they'll be reviewed by the county counselor's office.
So no domestics would be included in that list. So all
Correct.
domestics would stay being prosecuted,
Correct.
even if they're 20 years old.
Yeah, any victim crime, yes. So anything any case that would have a victim, that's going to be reviewed, whether it's nollied at the end of the day or whatever have you. That's purview of the county counselor's office. But our decision was for those cases to be reviewed.
So all crimes against persons will be reviewed.
Correct.
Okay, got it. That's all I have, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Harder?
I just want to do a quick follow-up. Councilman Tracus usually answers or asks a real good question to a lot of folks about nullification and dealing with police. What do you say to a policeman that is trying to enforce the laws, writing tickets for housing violations, speeding, domestics, other things, thinking, man, I'm going to do something out here, and I'm going to, bring some people to justice, there's going to be consequences and so on. And then the paperwork is lost, it's on a stack somewhere, never gets filed, it's backlogged, it's nullified, all this kind of stuff. What do you say to a policeman like that when that's what they do every day and they're trying to make our community better?
I would just remind the council of the topic of the meeting, budget. As was noticed. Careful
Sure.
to go too far afield of that.
Thank you.
I think that's a great question. And on one hand, it would be easy to say, sorry, that it just, but that doesn't feel good enough of an answer, quite frankly. But the reality is we haven't done a good job and we're going to do better. And thank you. That's really all you can say. I mean, there is no sufficient answer for that.
I mean, it must be very frustrating for you and your staff to feel like you're trying to accomplish anything and trying to better our community. And your supervisor and others are not, it's not important to them maybe. And these numbers fall away and then we don't have any revenue because of this. Not that that's the big thing of why we're here, to get the revenue. The idea is to change behavior. And that's not even being done. So
Sure.
it's like spinning your wheels in mud.
It's broken.
For your staff and everybody else to feel
Sure.
like there's nothing, you're not accomplishing anything
Yeah.
in this whole process. Do you feel that way?
No, I think it's easy to feel that way, but I don't feel that way. I mean, on the tough days, yeah, it's like, man, you know, it's like running in peanut butter. But at the same time, every day that we're doing good and we're doing individual justice in individual cases and responding to things as we can in the best way that we can, we're accomplishing something. And while, no, did I inherit a lot of this? Yeah, but ultimately the buck stops with me. So it's my responsibility to make sure that we're righting our ship and then we're get it going. So to, my staff that I know are out doing the very best that they can do and are adjusting to a pretty demanding director. I know the police officers are out there doing their best, and I know that the personnel changes in the county counselor's office, they're working hard to make the changes that they need to change. And those are that would be more the message that I would want our officers to see, that your work is not going unnoticed. And we've opened up lines of communication with them that have not existed before. It's much easier to pick up the phone and talk to somebody and say, hey, you know, we need to change this on a ticket, or this is where we're at on court dates. It's addressing the issues first have to be, the issues have to be identified, and opening those lines of communication were pivotal towards doing that. So the best thing that I can say to them is we're going to do better. And
finally, where should we be at the end of this year, in all this?
Tired.
Besides that. But where do you want to be at the end of this year? Backlog, goals, judges?
Stable.
Where do you see this?
I want to get back to a position to where we're stable. And I don't mean that to sound as if we're unstable now, but I want to be able to be stable enough to where we can put hard and fast measurable goals in place, to where it's not, okay, we're starting up to have court again, but we're very limited on how many people we can have. I want to be back to a greater sense of normalcy, for lack of a better word, and then move forward with our goals that we've had all along of growing the court and offering more services to the community through the court. And we can get back to that. So by the end of this year, my goal is to just be whole again, and where we can almost tell what's going to happen from day to day from an operational standpoint. You know, gearing back up to go live again and to have in-person court, as exciting as it is, you also have to keep in mind there's a possibility that we are going to have to gear back down at some point. So you become very cognizant operationally of, you know, how fast can we undo anything that we're going to put in place. So that stability is going to be pivotal to us by the end of the year. And that's, you know, I have 6 months to get us stable, and I'll get it done.
Appreciate your candor, appreciate your honesty. I'm glad you're bringing this forward. Unfortunately, your supervisor never brought this forward to us. So thank you for your candor.
No problem. Thank you very much. No,
One quick follow-up.
Matrix.
Can you tell us the percentage, and if you can't, that's understandable, and just focused on problem properties, what percentage of property owners would you categorize as repeat offenders or people that game the system with or without lawyers, meaning constantly getting continuances and putting things off? What's the percentage on that?
I couldn't quantify that. I would have to say that is specifically a docket where you see people over and over and over again. And is that because they're getting continuances, or is that because every day they aren't correcting the problem, they're getting a new ticket written up? So it could be a multitude of things, but to quantify that, I could not do that with any type of specificity.
Okay. Are you able to tell us, with problem properties, is it more or less people, once they're ticketed, generally comply and address the issue?
I think it goes back to what the issue is. I think somebody that needs to mow their lawn gets that done a lot quicker than somebody that has something else that needs to be addressed. But
so it's fair to say then the more serious problem properties tend to be chronic?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, there's been cases that I've seen that somebody's had 27 counts of things, and it's daunting to enter. I can't imagine having to overcome it. But yeah, I would think it would depend on what the
And those are the cases that we have no real teeth to do anything about?
at this time. No, I wouldn't say that we can't do much.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, thank you. No further questions. Thank you very much, Courtney. Let me, if you don't mind, Chris, let me just kind of finish up here. Very briefly, amnesty was mentioned. It seems as if you're moving along those lines in some form or another by having some of these cases dropped. I know that some municipalities have amnesty days where they come in, but I'm interested in, since we're dealing with the budget, that we're leaving money on the table there in some of these instances where we could collect that. I don't know if the process to collect is more egregious or more time consuming or more costly than just dropping. I don't know that that's something for you to determine. The other thing I want to do is that it is incumbent upon you to set the tone for your court. We will stand by you if that is what you need and what you need from us to do that. But it is not acceptable to just throw away municipal courts, or it doesn't really mean anything. And so that's within your purview to make sure that that happens. We have grilled you for almost 2 hours. We appreciate that, and we appreciate the candor with which you have come. And the things that we can affect, you need to make sure that we know those and that we can move forward with even answering others, the questions that need to be posed to us and why they have not been. So I do appreciate that. I'm going to let Chris close his comments, and then we'll see if we have any public comments at this point. We don't.
What? No, come on. I'm open to speak to anybody anytime. So if you have questions or want to talk about things, please.
Yes,
Please reach out.
other thing that you had was the heat and her. I have not seen those programs referred, don't know anything about them. When you get an opportunity, we can talk offline about both of those.
Perfect.
What they mean, okay?
Thanks.
Thank you. Chris?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Simply, I just had a question, as we had with the previous, one of the previous budget meetings, so that I know what I need to do next, if there is direction from this committee in relation to any further follow-up with the municipal courts.
Madam Chair,
Councilwoman Bennett.
I would like to follow up with some of the content that was brought up that wasn't budgetary, but it has to do with the municipal courts, to follow up with the committee hearing for justice, health, and welfare. Even in disclosing or getting more information about the Heat Her program, I think that would be the appropriate place to discuss that.
That
Is
would
there
be
any
fine.
action?
That would be fine. Anyone else? Suggestions at this point?
I concur with Councilwoman Webb. In fact, I emailed her to that point, specifically with problem properties. I mean, we have an issue we have to deal with. Obviously, it's bigger than we even imagined.
Yes.
And to your point, Madam Chair, we need to get behind the director so that the municipal court can at least stand for something.
Correct.
So,
That's your direction at this time. We will look at the Justice, Health, and Welfare Committee, and what comes out of that will be the directions for you.
okay, and then in terms of when she gets the invoice, do you want me to work with her in terms of presenting that to the council, depending on what she
Please.
needs?
Please.
I just want to know what it is you need from me going forward with in relation
And
to.
I'm sure you'll be getting emails.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Anything else? Anything else for the greater good? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 We are adjourned. Thank you, Councilman Fitch.
All right, take care.